Okay, welcome to session 2. Our presenter this time is Wedge Barthe from East Feliciana Parish, Louisiana. His presentation is Richland Hill, Stewardship in Practice since 1895. And Wedge has been an active member in Louisiana GLCI for 20 plus years and the American Forage and Grassland Council also. Welcome.
Thank you. I bring you greetings from Louisiana, folks. The wettest place in the world. This year, we're going to be in excess of probably 80 inches. That's astronomical. Forget that. Let me start by telling you a little bit about myself. I'm a 4th generation on the same piece of property. We have a total now of 474 acres. We manage about 170 acres of planted pine and old growth mixed timbers. We'll run up to 5 herds of 20 to 25 head per herd. The balance of this acreage is in permanent, heavy, wooded creek bottom that I hope no man ever walks across. It's pristine. Been that way for years. In 2009, my brother and I were recognized as Master Forage Producers by the Louisiana Forage and Grassland Council. That was an awesome thing. Something that we had been working on for a long time. Our tools are grasses, legumes, brassicas, and a small grain forages. We've experimented with a lot of non-typical seed mixes. I will plant anything, anywhere, anytime. Let me give you a little historical on this piece of property. My great-great-grandfather purchased it in 1895. Through the Great Depression, Richland Hill was home to the Ellis family. My great-grandparents had 16 children surviving. This piece of property was typical of the farming community in that era. We had sharecroppers. There was a lumber mill on the site, driven by a steam engine. There was a dairy. Of course, you have to have a blacksmith shop if you're going to run a farm. A general store. And believe it or not, we had their own post office, of which my grandmother was postmistress. Postage was 1 cent, and she got a percentage of that. I can't do the math. The animals were what was typical for the day: horses, mules, a lot of mules, cows, pigs, chickens, occasional goats, dogs, cats, and one son even had a monkey at times. Don't ask me where he came from. It was a typical farm for the area. Cotton for cash crop, corn for feed, and pasture. Now, this piece of property was 1,200 acres. The crops were on the high side of the property, and the pastures were on the creek side of the pasture. The cows stayed in the creek pasture from the time the crops were planted until they were harvested. Dump them over there. No management. 600 acres of grasses and woods. Very few fences, actually, because there was no stock laws in those times. So why'd you have to have a fence? If your cow went to your neighbors, he brought it back. By the middle of the Great Depression, it was no longer sustainable to do things that way. The property fell under a merchant's lien. That wasn't good. And although my grandfather and most of his siblings had been pulled to the city for work, my papa, one of the youngest of the children, chose to scrape up enough funds to get the Federal Land Bank to allow him to buy the property from the family or from the mortgage people.
Don't touch the button again, please, Daddy.
Back up?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
So therefore, our story of stewardship begins right along in there. Gradually paying the farm debt. I've got the wrong slide again.
There you go. Stay right there.
Gradually paying, I'm not good on this, folks. Gradually paying the farm debt by working at the Standard Oil Refinery in Baton Rouge. Farming on the weekends, farming on your day off, whatever he did. Papa was determined to keep this farm running and make a go of it. By the 1950s, he had bought his first Ford tractor. What a monumental occasion. Had a mongrel cow herd now. There were no purebreds out there. There were no high genetic cattle. We didn't know about all that, I suppose, in those days. I was only 10 years old. How would I know? The cows grazed that low pasture all summer, and then after the crops were gathered, they were brought back and they gleaned those cotton fields, those corn fields, and everything else in sight. So it was a sort of a different sort of situation. How did he pay for this? There were some timber sales. Occasionally an oil lease, which in those days were not very good, and a ground lease here and there. Finally, Papa decided, I'm going to retire. That's when that large piece of property was sold off, 600 acres on the west side. The farm then became a hobby and recreational retreat for the rest of the family. Then, in 1979, my mother and father sold their business in New Orleans. Mom and Daddy moved to the farm. My little brother, Sammy, moved to the farm. Wendy and her mama, we moved to a farm in Mississippi. And it was tough, but it was what we wanted to do. So you talk about stewardship. Let's talk about this for a second. We know that stewardship is defined as the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. In our case, it was the natural resources of Richland Hill. And that's where we begin, Sammy and I. In the late 80s, Sammy and I began our era of stewardships with the goal of turning them old cotton fields into lush pastures. We studied grazing management from every book, every conference, every article we could get our silly little hands on. We began replacing barbed wire fence, I hate that stuff, with powered fence. that was a chore. We attended every workshop that AFGC put on, LFGC put on, NRCS put on. Anywhere where we could glean a little knowledge, we went. Daddy helped us do that. Thank goodness. After all that sort of stuff went on, I had occasion to meet up with Ray Archuleta, Alan Williams, Gabe Brown, and Doug Peterson at a conference. Their approaches seemed workable to the way we were looking to do things. So that's where we really got into it. We were already managed grazing. We were already intensive grazing. But there was something missing. We had to find that missing link. You know, you build a chain, you one link at a time. And unfortunately, in the cow business, we are the bottom link on the chain, and nobody cares about who hooks on above us. Different subject. Our forage program is completely simple. Grow, graze, and repeat. Does that make sense? Seed mixes for us are a game. If somebody tells me that seed won't grow, oh brother, you just messed up. Because I'll try it. What grasses do we have on the farm? In the warm season, we got common Bermuda grass, Bahia grass, crabgrass, signal grass, carpet grass, Dallas grass, Johnson grass, and millets. Warm season legumes, which I am a nut over legumes. Sun hemp, Alice clover, cowpeas, Louisiana S1 clover. Hold on to your seats. Kudzu. What did he say? Kudzu. My little brother told me if I planted one seed of kudzu on Richland Hill, he'd kill me. But folks, that is one potentially tremendous grazing crop if you can control it. And it's controllable with enough animals, but we won't go there. Cool season grasses. Everybody in our part of the world uses ryegrass because we don't have a perennial winter product. It just does not grow in South Louisiana. Oats, wheat, cereal rye. Cool season legumes. Arrowleaf clover, ball clover, berseem clover, Singletary peas, Cali peas, vetches, Ladino white clover, winter peas, chicory. I thought that meant coffee. Subterranean clover. If I had my druthers, subterranean would be the only thing I'd plant. There's only one problem. Seed is about as scarce as hen's teeth. So there you go. How do we plant things? Well, we've experimented with a lot of planting methods. Full seed bed prep. That doesn't work in Louisiana because along about January or February it's raining 6 inches a month and the mud's that deep. You can't even go into pasture. So what we've tried doing, we used a no-till drill. We rented it. Nobody knew how to set the blooming thing. We didn't know whether the seeds were at a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, or when we planted sun hip with it one time, I found some at 6 inches. That didn't work. place, yeah. No, that's the wrong place. In late fall, the cattle become part of our planting program. What do the cows have to do with the planting program? Well, they glean off all the stockpile that we've been saving since back in August. And then we come in, put our seed and fertilizer down, and we still use a little fertilizer. We have half-rated our fertilizer. And then we come back with a straight disc and a chain harrow drag behind it, checkerboard pattern across the field. It looks like EWQ, but it comes up and it flourishes. It's the least expensive method that we have found so far. There you go. We've never used herbicides in any of our pastures. I don't believe in spraying pasture. Now, I know some of that, y'all don't understand that, but that's just me. But the biggest thing about not spraying your pastures, cows will eat weeds, folks. The first young lady said she had some cows that were eating cattails. Haven't tried that yet. Don't have that many. But, lost myself. Excuse me 1 second.
Just the white faces that'll eat the horse now?
Yeah. This is first time I've ever recorded this, and my daughter took the pictures a couple of weeks ago. That's dog fennel or cypress weed or whatever else you want to call it. At this time of year in our environment, it's fully mature. It's got these little seeds on the top, and these blooming cows were eating it. Don't ask me why. I don't know. And that poor lady over there, the horse nettles had turned a little yellow, held the little yellow balls. She was not eating the yellow balls, though, but she was sure eating those leaves. I don't know why, but brother, record that number because I want that genetics and the rest of the stuff in the herd. She's the one you want to keep, guys. So, there you go. I guess the whole thing to understand in this whole grazing concept is you have to graze. But more importantly than grazing is the rest period. Rest is what gives Mother Nature time to regenerate the forage, to help regenerate the soil. Why is it so difficult to understand? I don't know. We graze and rest on all of our pastures. Some of them only get grazed 3 times a year. Some get grazed 4 times a year. It all determines by what is there at the time of the year you're there. Record and observe. I like that. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We graze 25 to 35,000 pounds of animals per acre per day. Now, some of you are going to say, gosh, that's too high. Not really. I remember when I went to the grazing school in '93 at Linneus, Missouri, Jim Garish had a graduate student out there with a GPS marking manure piles. They did that for 5 years, from what Jim told me, to see how much manure that cow put in that pasture and what the distribution of it was in the pasture. What a terrible waste of manpower. Just put the animal out there and let her graze in a tight area. And for us now, our tight area is 90 feet wide, 90 feet deep. They'll be there 12 hours. And when we come back with the chain harrow, the drag, you're not dragging soil anymore, you're dragging manure. And that manure has value. Believe me. At least I think so. One thing you got to have to make this system work is all them little white pieces of string out there. I had a customer come to the shop one day and he said, I want to buy some of that catfish line that man bought down the road from me. I said, what do you know about catfish line? He said, that little white plastic string. I said, man, that's got wire in it. Huh? He didn't know what that was. Therefore, I didn't sell it to him because I knew he didn't know how to use it. Why sell a man something he can't take home and use? Go to a fishing store and buy some white string. I don't know. One of the secrets to our operation is stockpile pastures. Why do we use the stockpile pasture? Because when I went to Garrish's school, he said, Wedge, when do y'all start feeding hay? November the 1st. When you finish? April 15th, May the 1st. He went berserk. He said, we only feed hay 90 days in Missouri. Why you feed it so long? I don't know why we did it. Everybody else had done it that way. Why did we want to change? So, you talk about stockpile, what's it doing? It's saving hay. Now, hay is a very sorry subject in most operations. We do not make our own hay. It's too expensive. We can buy it, have it delivered in the pasture. Why play with it? However, then comes the problem of how do you deliver the hay to the cow when you need to give it to the cow? Here comes another can of worms. Bell rings. Mud, flies, nasty. It'll work. I don't particularly care for it. Bale grazing with no structure at all, that's going to waste your hay. The system that a lot of folks are using right now, and I'm not doing it, I have to admit I'm not doing it. Bale grazing by rolling it out on the ground and let the cows eat it out there rolled out. Now, I did try this for a while, and when I tried it, I was going to be inventive. We rolled the hay down the hill, and I built a polywire fence right down the middle of that 5-foot bale. Why in the world did you want to do that? Well, I don't know if any of you have been in a school building and watched the little kids line up at the water fountain over there and how they go in there one at a time. I was thinking, because I had been in that racket one time, if I put that line down the middle, that cow's not going to walk out on that bale, lay down on it, or do other things on it. If I put that wire up, she's going to have her head down there to eat, and the discharge in is going to be out in the pasture. Wasn't a bad idea. But more importantly than that, when you put that hay down on the ground, you've imported somebody else's product to your field, maybe even weeds, but it's building your soil. And that's what we all ought to be interested in, is building soil. The other thing it does, it feeds the little herd. Now, the little herd is a word that was coined by one of our producers in North Louisiana. He was the first man I ever heard that said when he was feeding his cows and all this stuff, he was also feeding the little herd in the soil. And that has really ticked on me. So that's what we're doing. How do we make this any better? We repeat the process every season. Now, we don't plant every season. We only plant winter pastures. Because my grandmother told me one time, you know, boy, you got a big curious. And over the years, we've partnered with a lot of academic programs, NRCS, on grazing methods, fencing, water systems, grass-raised beef for home sale, and all that sort of thing. Right now, beginning in January, we are starting a new venture. This is going to be done with Southern University A&M in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Dr. Pat Bagley is going to be the lead scientist on this. They are setting up one farm in western Louisiana that's a clear-cut timber operation just completed, and they're going to establish it as pasture. In the central part of the state, they have a gentleman that's been doing this grazing system for about 3 years. We're on the eastern side. Of course, we've been in it about 30 years. What we're going to look at, we're going to study ground conditions, forage diversity, pasture conditions, forage production, soil improvement, root masses, and biological condition. Folks, that's a big ball of wax. But it's what we need to start looking at and analyzing and deciding what's the most important elements of those things. Do I have another slide, Wendy? There it is. These are just some of the processes and techniques that we have used to improve our soil health. We graze and herd management. And hopefully, the 5th generation sitting over there will continue. Y'all are welcome to come and visit anytime you'd like. I'm always open to sharing information. I'll sit and talk with you for hours. I'll even do it on the internet. I'm not very proficient at it, but I'll do it. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you all may have. But first, I'd like to say one thing. If it hadn't been for organizations like this and some other super fine people that I have been associated with over the years who are sitting in this room right now, we wouldn't be at this point. You have to be inquisitive and you have to be inclusive. Don't ever forget it. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
You have established pastures where you had to cut over, like clear-cut timber?
We do not. We are in the timber side. We had intended to go into silvopasture, but the timber markets took a terrible dive in our part of the world. Our timber is worth practically nothing. We cut a tract back in the middle of the summer that was 100-year-old timber, $39 a ton. I used to get that for pulpwood in the 70s. So that's a problem.
We cut some trees, not totally clear cut,
Yes, ma'am.
but we cut some trees that's kind of on a hilly, terraced area. And my husband's doing all this himself, and he's scooping up the trash that was left by the loggers.
Right.
And trying to deal with stumps. And anyway, he has broadcast with a 4-wheeler and a spreader some ryegrass seed.
Excellent.
And so, I mean, that's what we're doing, and he's gonna eventually try and get up to the stumps and maybe plant some more trees and
Well, that was our intention. I know of a silvopasture organization or a farm, it was in Florida. This gentleman came out of the forestry industry 30-something years ago. He established a pine tree plantation, 90-foot wide strips, 5 rows of trees, water in all of it, put in ryegrass, and I think they used Pensacola hairgrass and clovers. Never replanted it until the storm of 2 or 3 years ago wiped it out. That was sickening, because a storm goes through a pine thicket, a pine pasture, a pine whatever. They twist, they turn, they break, the lumber shreds on the inside and has absolutely zero value.
He wants to do a few hardwoods, mostly for the cows, and root establishment for the pasture, because it is a little hilly. And terraced.
Yes, sir.
Which, you were talking about stockpiling your pastures. That's something I do. I'm a hay Bermuda guy as well. What I found is, though, October, November, those pastures quality is really low. Also noticed it looked like you were fall calving. So are you offering?
Negative. We don't fall calf.
Okay, I saw a calf on what I thought.
Well, that might have been a straggler. Occasionally we have a miss-up.
So are you then raising open cows on your stockpile, or is it pairs?
No, the cows that we're grazing on the stockpile right now are bred cows. They will calve hopefully in March and April. We calve a little bit earlier because of the fly problem in Louisiana. At least we do. That's it.
But you haven't used any supplement in conjunction?
Well, no, we do use some supplement. We do supplement. We started supplement the day I left home on those dry mature cows. Now, we had been supplementing the bred heifers, and we had been supplementing the replacement heifer candidates. Okay?
I'm asking what's your supplement?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a ground feed, about a 14% ground feed.
Yeah, great.
A lot of roughage in it.
Okay, we're going to have to stop there.
I quit.
Thank you very much. That was really enjoyable.